Thanks for tuning into Wine Blast. Sign up to Wine Blast Plus to support the show, enjoy early access to all episodes, and get exclusive subscriber-only content. Just visit wineblast.co.uk or click the link in the show notes. We currently have a 15% early bird discount, so don't hang around. Hello and welcome to Wine Blast. In this episode, we are going to be on positively effervescent form because we are talking sparkling wine, one of my all-time favourite topics.
It is, isn't it? And I think the challenge is going to be keeping you from getting overexcited here.
Probably.
I think we might have to strap you into your chair or something at some stage.
Promises.
See how we go. Welcome, everyone. We're talking all things Fizz with someone who answers our standard question of what do you have for breakfast, which we do just to check microphone levels at the beginning of every interview, in the following glorious way.
Oh, I actually had a glass of crystal rosé for breakfast. And it's the truth.
Essi Avellan, take a bow. Life goals right there. So, Essi is from Finland, a fellow master of wine and one of the world's top authorities on champagne and sparkling wine. She's just published a monograph, or small pocketbook, in conjunction with the International Wine and Food Society, entitled Sparkling Wines of the World, which has as its main focus, and it's quite a timely one, traditional method wines from outside of Champagne. So wines made like champagne, but not from champagne. And as you can probably imagine, it's really rather brilliant.
It is indeed, isn't it? It's fantastic. So this is a sponsored episode in conjunction with the International Wine and Food Society, or IWFS, which brings wine and food lovers together all around the world in the name of education, conviviality and fun. They've got about 6,000 members worldwide and do many things, including organising wine and food tours, putting on delicious tastings and events, and of course publishing intriguing monographs. Well, apart from one decidedly dodgy one on English wine that came out a few years back. I don't know if you recall that.
May or may not have been written by us. Definitely was, actually. I think it was pretty good, wasn't it?
It was, to be fair.
Anyway, the IWFS is well worth checking out. We'll put links in the show notes, including a link that will give you a huge 40% discount on buying Essi's monograph. So just £6 down from £9.99. Now that's until the end of December 2025. So a handy stocking filler or present for yourself, whatever. It's a really good offer, so make the most of it while it lasts.
Absolutely, and that's not all, because we'll also be giving our Wine Blast Plus subscribers the chance to get Essi's IWFS monograph entirely free. How about that? If you are a Wine Blast Plus subscriber, just check your show notes and there will be an email address to write into. The first 50 people to do that with their postal address will get a copy absolutely free. You know, how about that for a subscriber benefit?
Pretty cool, yeah. And just to add, the IWFS does take data protection very seriously, so they will be deleting all your details after sending your special freebie out to you. Right, let's get on with the sparkling stuff. So in this episode, we're going to be hearing Essi's unique and fascinating take on traditional method sparkling wines from all around the world. And I do mean all around the world, including places like India, China and Serbia, among others.
Yeah, we're also going to be hearing from longtime IWFS member and UK wine trade guru, Mimi Avery. Plus, we're going to be, and you may have guessed this already, any excuse, we're going to be tasting and recommending a couple of brilliant bottles. Again, with the theme of delicious and different things made like champagne, but not from champagne. And indeed from some rather surprising places, in quite surprising ways. So this really is quite a fun one.
I suppose, I mean, thinking about it, it does tie in quite nicely with the Battle of the Bubbles episode we released fairly recently.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
Where, in a tasting of some of the very finest, most vaunted names in Fizz, including Bollinger RD, Krug, Winston Churchill, Comte de Champagne, Dom Perignon, etc., not only did two English sparkling wines emerge as the favourites, but also, in our opinion, two great value sparklers really shone too. The Roederer Quartet from California and Cloudy Bay Pelorus from New Zealand.
Yeah, that's right. So it's well worth checking out that episode too. But we need to cut to the chase here. And before we get into the monograph itself, we should introduce Essi properly. As well as being a master of wine and sparkling wine expert, she's the co-author of the monumental Christie's World Encyclopedia of Champagne and Sparkling Wine, and long-time judge at the Champagne and Sparkling Wine World Championships.
Now, she'd been handing out the gongs at the latter's big awards ceremony the night before our interview, which might explain the Cristal Rosé 2013 for breakfast. Or maybe that's just a standard Essi thing. I don't know. Anyway, we made sure to try to keep her awake and on her toes by asking her lots of searching questions, including the following quickfire Q&A. Cava or Prosecco?
Cava.
Best value region for traditional method sparkling wine?
Trento Doc.
Blanc de Blanc or Blanc de Noir?
Blanc de Blanc.
Most memorable sparkling wine bottle or experience?
I think it must be the taste of the oldest existing bottle of champagne, 1825 Perrier Jouet, with some very dear colleagues and Champagne Noir.
Best sparkling wine and food pairing?
There are so many. I must be boring and say white truffle with a super good Blanc de Blanc champagne.
Not boring at all. Which glass is best for sparkling wine?
A tulip shape, large enough glass.
Where will the limits of sparkling wine production be in 20 years' time?
Well, I hope not in Finland. I hope the climate doesn't warm up so much that we could grow vines in Finland.
If you had an unlimited budget, where would you choose to make sparkling wine?
That's an interesting question. Well, champagne, of course.
Okay, so I think that gives us a good insight into Essi, the person, as well as the Fizz expert, with her predilection for 1825 Perrier Jouet and white truffles, don't you know? Just off the back of that, though, if you, Susie Barry, had an unlimited budget, where would you make sparkling wine?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe California, you know. There's a good lifestyle, nice people, lovely food.
Yes.
Or actually, to be fair, Tasmania. Such an amazing place. It would also mean I could get some winter sunshine, which I would love. Yeah. And they are making fabulous sparkling wines there right now, aren't they?
Yeah, totally agree.
What about you?
Me? I'd probably go England. It's at the risk of being boring. Maybe we could do both. We could do both. You know, two hemispheres. England, Tasmania. Love that.
We'd never argue, would we? We'd be so far apart.
Anyway, let's get back to Essi and her Sparkling Wines of the World monograph. I mean, it is an intriguing read, isn't it?
Yeah.
Partly because it's such a concise publication. It's really dinky and pocket size, you know, and only about 100 pages. But it packs in so much information and informed opinion, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. It's very clever. There is so much in there. She's brilliant on things like winemaking, the history, grape varieties, glassware, food, the best bottle sizes for Fizz. And there are also loads, which I loved, of really useful tables and graphics to help explain and illustrate things. She does touch on champagne, but she mainly goes on a whistle-stop global tour of exciting sparkling wine areas all around the world. And as you say, it's done so concisely and eloquently.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking we should probably just have a brief explainer here about traditional method sparkling wine. So wine made like champagne, you know, what does it mean? By that traditional method, we mean those sparkling wines that get their bubbles from re-fermenting in the bottle. So the base wine is made normally, but then it's put back into the bottle with a bit more sugar and yeast, and re-fermenting within that closed bottle gives it the bubbles.
But the magic of this traditional method is not just the way the bubbles are formed, it's what we call the infusion effect, because once the yeast cells die off in this small fermentation format of the bottle, or slightly larger magnum, the yeast leaves then infuse the wine with aromas and textures and character, a bit like, you know, an infusion with tea.
Yeah, you know, and we're also going to touch on dosage in this episode. Again, something we've looked at before on the pod, but after the second fermentation and aging process, that we've just described, the yeast lees are taken out of the wine and it's topped up with a dosage, which can include a small amount of sugar or sweet grape juice.
And this is, of course, very much up to the producer and what style they want to make. In the old days, most traditional method sparkling wine was pretty sweet. And these days, it's the opposite, mostly pretty dry. And there has been a notable trend of late to go super dry with ultra low dosage levels, something we ask Essi about. Either way, all of this complexity and detail means traditional method fizz is endlessly fascinating.
And in her monograph, Essi doesn't shy away from voicing her opinion, which I think is great. You might not always agree, but it makes it so much more interesting. She busts a few myths and delivers quite a few top tips. At one point, she recommends banning certain bottles. That's something we'll come on to in our interview. And some of my favourite quotes from her monograph include the following. It is hard to think of a wine more cheerful than sparkling wine. And another one, my advice, skip the half bottles and opt for the larger formats.
Cheers to that. So I began by asking Essi to tell us about her monograph.
Yeah, it was a great privilege to be able to write this monograph booklet for the International Wine and Food Society. Personally, I've worked with wine for more than 20 years today, and I've specialized in champagne and sparkling wine for maybe close to 20 years now, so a long time. So of course it's a very, passionate subject for me, and it was really nice to make this rather concise book about it, because it's such a dynamic topic, and I think people don't quite know what's happening around the world.
Now, you know sparkling wine inside out. What is so special about it?
Well, there's many things that fascinate me about sparkling wine. When I got into the wine world, the more I knew, the better I know it. To start to understand the complexity of the sparkling wine world. By far, it's the most complicated wine style to make. It's really the one where the impact of the human hand is the greatest. And that to me, sometimes, people say that, okay, champagne is not a terroir wine because there's so much blending taking place, for example. But whereas to me, it's really a human craft, that blending thing. And to me, it actually enhances the appreciation of champagne, and the same goes with other sparkling wines as well. So I thought it was like sparkling wine was a bit misunderstood, that it's just the easy party drink. You don't need to know much about it, and just pop the cork and that's it. Whereas actually there's such a great, know-how behind, and of course just as vast terroir as for any other wine.
Just tell us about the market performance of sparkling wines, including champagne, in recent years.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, at this moment, wines are facing quite challenging times, especially red wine. It's actually quite worrying to look at the world consumption trend now. The trend looks luckily better for sparkling wine, I think for many reasons. One being that we like lighter styles, fresher styles at the moment. And also I think a lot of it is impacted by women drinking wine, more wine, and also women being increasingly also in control of what the household drinks. And I think women have, for some reason, I don't know why, there is this preference for sparkling wine, and that's helping a lot. One thing what I'm trying myself to encourage is to drink sparkling wine throughout the meal, which to me, like, there's so much more, potential for consumption of sparkling wine if you take it away from just being an aperitif or a party drink to be an actual food wine.
And do you think there is, in that sense, and maybe other senses too, room for further growth? Yeah,
definitely. And that's happening right now. I think Prosecco is, of course, the wine that has grown massively in the last 10, 15 years. So I think, sometimes, many Champenois or other sparkling wine producers, they consider this as a risk. They see Prosecco as a great competitor, taking away market share from them. But I actually think Prosecco is a good, stepping stone into the world of more complex styles of sparkling wine. So I see it as a positive trend.
So if we just go back a step from that, from where it all began, the history of the traditional method being created, it's a curious one, isn't it? And I know many people refer to Dom Perignon, but the truth is slightly different, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I think in many places it still gets repeated that Dom Perignon invented sparkling wine, but actually I think nowadays we believe that he actually fought against the bubbles all his career. He was trying to make still wine, but of course at that time, in the 17th century, they didn't understand what is fermentation. So it meant that the wines, when the cellars in Champagne, when they got cold in the winter, the fermentation just stopped. And if the wine had been bottled, the weather got warmer again in the spring, it started again. And of course, the bottles bursted, and we got those bubbles as an end result, which were considered as a fault in the beginning.
So we didn't talk about Christopher Merritt and his influence. Could you just talk a little bit about that?
Yes, so in the beginning, the Champenois were really trying to avoid the wine bubbling, and it was actually illegal to sell champagne in bottles until 1728. So you couldn't actually have sparkling champagne in bottles in another country. So that was why an Englishman, at least the first recorded one was Christopher Merritt in 1662, that he deliberately added sugar and yeast to a wine of champagne to make it ferment here in England.
So did it really start in England?
Yeah, exactly. The deliberate one, probably made by addition of sugar, probably did.
Okay, so I'm just going to jump in here because I think it's worth picking up on this issue of fizz in wines being considered a fault for a long time, and then the suggestion that the traditional method, sometimes referred to as the méthode champenoise, was actually invented in England rather than in France.
Yeah, it is worth clarifying a bit. Firstly, on the fault issue, when people didn't understand the mechanics of fermentation and yeasts, pre-Louis Pasteur, they didn't realise that yeasts could go dormant at low temperatures. So if you still had sugar and viable yeast in your wine, but you put it in bottle and then it got cold, like in Champagne in autumn and winter, when those bottles warmed up again in the spring, the fermentation would restart, creating bubbles, hence pressure. And if your bottles weren't strong enough, they'd explode, on occasion causing serious injuries, which is why, as Essi explains in her monograph, sparkling wine was sometimes known as the devil's wine.
The devil's wine.
The devil's.
I mean, that's a marketing strapline right there, isn't it? I'd want a bit of that anyway. But yeah, actually, when it's causing serious injury, that's a different matter. But then the English, who had stronger bottles and also insights from the cider making process, realised you could put a base wine into a strong bottle, add more sugar and yeast, and make it sparkling deliberately and safely. And this method was outlined in a paper delivered to the Royal Society in 1662 by Christopher Merritt. So the evidence, as he says, does indeed indicate that the English invented this traditional method. Méthode anglaise, maybe. I don't know. Sounds a bit like custard, doesn't it? But then the French, of course, picked up that particular ball and ran with it, and the rest is wine history.
Indeed. I think we're going to go into this subject in a bit more depth in a future episode.
Yes.
So keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, I like Essi's way of framing fizz as the wine where the impact of the human hand is greatest and to good effect. Because we don't always give enough credit, do we, to the importance of human skill in the winemaking process.
I think that is such a good point. I also like her way of seeing Prosecco as a sort of entry point to the wider category of sparkling wine too. It's a sort of nice and friendly way of reframing that particular competition. Right, let's take a breath before coming back for more fizzy wine fun.
Hello, us again. Just letting you know, we've published a brilliant subscriber-only bonus episode, and it's one you won't want to miss.
Yes, we did a tasting of 12 top Super Tuscans, featuring some stellar names and hefty price tags like Sassicaia, Tignanello and Solaya, all blind, all from the acclaimed 2021 vintage. And this is our no-holds-barred report on that unique tasting, including our considered conclusions and thoughts on the future of the category.
And we recommend some great value alternatives to the Super Tuscans. To access the show, sign up to Wine Blast Plus. We've got an early bird offer for you. Just head to wineblast.co.uk or click the link in our show notes. Here are a couple of snippets to whet your appetite.
There was a bony tannic grip. I put like the Grim Reaper squeezing your tongue.
That's a bit
I didn't think I was necessarily being negative there, actually. I quite liked that in a funny way. Bizarre.
Do you?
Well, in a little, maybe a sort of slightly masochistic way. No fancy aromatics nor succulents. A sort of rugged tannic slap is what I wrote, old school.
Who doesn't love a rugged tannic slap? I just put it had real savoury drinkability, as well as, that hedonistic, just richness. It was really good.
In 3 words, savoury, drinkability, hedonism. That's kind of what you want in these wines, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I mean, what's wrong with hedonism? We'll agree disagreeably then.
I think on that one, yes. So let's move on to...
Disagree agreeably. I've got to get that the right way around.
Yeah, we're going to move on to... Other shows use that catchphrase, and I think maybe we don't have to go down that route too much. We don't need to go We're just going to disagree. With wine, disagree vinously. There we go.
Oh, that's better.
These were all really good wines, right?
Yeah.
Were there any that absolutely blew you away, that made you fall in love so much you just had to buy some? I'm seeing your face at the moment, turned out to be our joint favourites.
I know, it was my top wine. I mean, by a smidgen, but this was surprisingly my top wine.
I mean, also interesting because it's one of the cheaper wines on show, which
is
not like you.
Never a cheap date.
Not like you. No. £95. Well, not that £95 is cheap.
Within context, it's really cheap.
Yeah. By way of brief recap so far, sparkling wine is a fast-moving, dynamic category, and an intriguing new publication by Essi Avellan MW offers an informative and opinionated insight into the world of traditional method fizz, busting a fair few myths along the way. Sorry, Dom Perignon and all that.
So we are midway now through our interview with Essi, and next up, I ask her where she stands on the low dosage debate.
For me, actually, the amount of sugar is not that interesting, or the category where the wine belongs. To me, as long as the balance is correct, to me, it's a good thing. I don't like necessarily the trend for the driest possible wine, because often, at least the wines of Champagne or England or many other very cool corners of the world, the balance just doesn't work. The wines are a bit, they're of course high in acidity, because the sugar can round that feeling of acidity a lot. But where I think it often makes a negative impact is the finish of the wine. So I feel like if the wine has the right amount of dosage, even very little, it really adds on the length and the deliciousness of the wine. And to me, deliciousness is very important quality criteria, because I like wines where you really, as soon as you've swallowed it, you just want to take the next sip. So this sort of drinkability is essential.
And I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What do you consider to be the best bottle format for sparkling wine, and why?
Well, I guess one could say that the bigger the better, really, but there's a limit to that. So I think the normal 75 centiliter is quite a small format for very beautiful aging of the wine, whereas the Magnum is, I think, the very ideal in its ratio of oxygen ingress over time. So I prefer a Magnum. In a blind tasting, basically I'd say 99 times out of 100, I prefer the Magnum. The difference is so great.
So now, Champagne is obviously the global benchmark when it comes to traditional method sparkling wine. What's exciting you about Champagne right now?
Champagne is actually superbly dynamic at the moment. It's really, there's so much happening there at the now. When I started in the Champagne world, I was doing my Master of Wine at the time, and my dissertation was about the single vineyard champagnes. At the time, I could find less than 30 different, and now I can name more than 700. So that really explains like a big transition in what's what's taking place. I think champagne is really considered as a wine nowadays. There are people who are super passionate about it, want to know about its terroirs as passionately as people do of Burgundy. And the single vineyard champagnes are really valuable, like shorthand devices in that, because you can actually taste wine from that particular plot and the next one, and then you can maybe better appreciate the complexity of the blend afterwards. To me, very seldom the single vineyard champagne would be the best, but they are really useful in understanding the region better.
There are, of course, many exciting areas beyond champagne when it comes to traditional method sparkling wine. Which ones in particular would you highlight?
Well, of course, English sparkling wine is super exciting, and there are a lot of people now asking about, is it getting too hot in Champagne? Will England be the next source of this sort of very lean, fresh style of sparkling wine? And I think now a couple of Champenois houses have established vineyards here, so I think that speaks of the potential of England. I'd say overall, Italy is the most dynamic country as a whole for sparkling wine. So they are a great champagne market. They love to celebrate and drink sparkling wine, but they have increasingly great sparkling wines themselves. Of course, Prosecco in the tank method, but more and more Franciacorta, Trento Doc, Alta Langa, and even all the way down to Sicily and Campania. They have great sparkling wines.
If we want to find the best value for money when it comes to traditional method sparkling wines outside of Champagne, where should we be looking?
Well, I think, as I mentioned, Italy overall is extraordinary. What's been really interesting in the recent years is the rise of Eastern Europe. As you might know, there was this big tradition of sparkling wine there already during the communist era, but it was, of course, these big, government-owned facilities. But I think they taught people to like sparkling wines, and now in many of the countries, Hungary, Bulgaria, Romania, Serbia, there's actually great sparkling wines coming and at very, very affordable prices.
You do talk quite a bit about that in your book, don't you? I know it's a fascinating little section. Can you give us some examples of, other more left field traditional method sparkling wines, perhaps from other parts of the world that we're not so familiar with?
Yeah, what's interesting is the rise in the New World countries. They would largely be using the Champagne grape variety, so it's this sort of similar style to what we are used to. Australia, especially Tasmania, it's like technically they're super sound, the wines, and climate is very suitable. New Zealand is something what I'd love to see more in Europe, but the best New Zealand sparkling wines tend to stay in New Zealand and in Australia, so we don't get to taste them as much. Before I started to look into it, I actually thought that California would be a very hot place to produce sparkling wine. But actually, when you are at the right spots like Anderson Valley, it's actually a fabulous area for sparkling wine. And I really, truly love those wines.
And I know that you mentioned Nova Scotia, Ningxia in China. What about those?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as I said before, if you understand what is needed, if it's not like people think chalk is necessary for producing top quality sparkling wine. When we talk about English sparkling wine, you often bring up the topic of the chalk, but you actually don't need that chalk. It's about, where you are and the hydrology within the vineyard that what brings the best results. So you can actually, India, it's a tropical climate. The grapes grow 2 harvests a year, of which they only pick the spring one and make wine from that. In Ningxia, you have to bury the wines. It's so cold, so continental. You actually have to bury the wines, the vines for the winter. So you have very extreme surroundings where you can make top quality sparkling wines. Both of those, for example, have won gold medals at the Champagne and Sparkling Wine World Championships where I judge.
So we may see more of those in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what's the most unusual or unique traditional method fizz you've ever tasted?
That's an interesting question. I'm quite intrigued by these. Now, in the world of wine, we have a big trend for autochthonous varieties all around the world, and of course, they have also a lot to give in the sparkling wine scene. So, like in Campania, of course, we would be using the Fiano, Greco, Falangina grape varieties. I was fascinated by Cuvage that makes a Nebbiolo d'Alba traditional method sparkling wine, an extremely good one at that. And of course, the red sparkling wines are always fascinating. The first time you taste them, you think, I'm not sure if this is good, but once you get used to them, they actually can be super good.
In the right context, I guess.
Yes.
In your book, you mentioned the perils of light strike, and something that we've covered on the pod, and something to which traditional method sparkling wine is particularly susceptible. Can you tell us a bit about that and what your advice would be on that front?
Yes, exactly. There is something in the method that produces a lot of these chemicals that make it especially prone to the destruction of light. Of course, you should never keep any wine in clear glass bottle in direct light. But the traditional method sparkling wines, they develop this, what we call the light strike or goût de lumière, taste of light, within minutes. You can easily test it at home. Just put a glass of sparkling wine outside for 5 minutes in the sunlight and compare it to a fresh one, and it's a night and day. So they develop this sort of, cabbagey, yogurty, sometimes very, very pungent, even like sewage-like aromas very quickly. And the consumers are not aware of it, and even the trade are very poorly aware of it, which I think is a big problem, because these bottles seem to be very attractive to the consumers. They really work commercially, and there are some wines that have become even very popular, a lot because of the clear glass bottle. They look so stunning. And then, of course, other people copy the recipe, and we have more and more of them.
But would you like to see clear flint glass banned?
Yeah, absolutely. If I was Champagne or some other area, I would totally ban the clear glass bottles. They are just complete insanity. Very often it happens that at the wineries, they serve me the wines tasting of light strike. So if they cannot keep them proper at their own wineries, how could the merchants, how could the consumers ever do so? And there's no way knowing it before opening the bottle, so it's a problem.
And how do you see the future for sparkling wine?
Yeah, I see the future very positively. I think people are generally liking the style, and it's a dynamic world. Still have things happening all around the world for that. But in this same moment, I must say that I am a little concerned also for sparkling wine of this today's trend of drinking less wine and being a bit too healthy sometimes, and not celebrating, and not, because what is wonderful about wine and sparkling wine is that it's really, something that brings people together. And this to me is very, very valuable. So
thank you, Essi.
Thank you so much.
Cheers to the importance of bringing people together and celebrating and not being too serious all the time.
Oh, wholeheartedly agree with that.
Yeah. We totally endorse that sentiment, don't we? But, interesting that she'd advocate for banning clear glass bottles, calling them complete insanity, something we've called for too. And also, interestingly, the Magnum effect.
We didn't go into too much detail there, but clearly Essi feels that Magnums are the best way to go when it comes to traditional method sparkling wine, just because it seems to be the Goldilocks production zone for Top Fizz, where the flavour development just works best, hence preferring them 99 times out of 100 in blind tastings compared to the same wine in a normal bottle.
Now, she had a great story about a larger format, didn't she?
She did.
When we chatted.
We were talking properly large formats like Jeroboams and bigger. And she mentioned that the rules in Champagne have changed recently to allow producers to re-ferment the wines in smaller bottles. Then when that's all done, fill up the Jeroboam formats using a bunch of the smaller bottles. But she says she's very anti this because you lose the all-important flavour effect of maturing the wines actually inside those Jeroboams. Anyway, on that topic, she confessed she'd had a big birthday recently and had served a Nebuchadnezzar, that's 20 bottles worth, of Champagne Parma, which is renowned as a producer who still makes these large formats in the traditional way.
That sounds like a very good party.
She said it was indeed a good party. Moving on though, let's bring in Mimi Avery, who worked for the International Wine and Food Society and actually met its founder, the great André Simon. She's got a brilliant photo of her as a tiny tot perched on his knee and sipping white wine out of his glass. Now, for many years, Mimi worked for her eponymous family firm, Avery's of Bristol, before recently launching a solo business as a speaker presenter. I asked her to tell us about her experience as a long-standing member of the IWFS and what she enjoys about it.
Well, way back in the beginning when I joined it, it was lovely to meet all these amazing people who wanted to know so much about wine and food. But also, they do fantastic tours of various areas. And so, for example, when they said they were doing a trip to Piedmont, I was sat there going, yeah, I'm in, I'm there, I'm going. And then there was also one of the newer branches, Valencia. Within a year of setting up, they had us all there for a weekend. And they're brilliant. Fantastic.
So beyond the trips, what are the main benefits of being a member?
Oh, the people. Absolutely the people. I mean, you get out of it what you put in, as with all sorts of things. So there's a lot of stuff going on around the world and people visit each other. And yeah, you just get to meet lots of people and find out about lots of nice wines in nice environments with some pretty good food to go with.
I should hope so. So we're talking about sparkling wine specifically today. So in what ways is sparkling wine important within the IWFS context?
Again, going back to the tours that I've done, you go to Asti and you try Moscatos there. And it's very different to trying them in England on a cold October day at lunchtime when you're doing a tasting of 10 wines for quality control and it's all a bit meh. But when you're there and you're experiencing it and you hear about the history and how long they've been producing it, and it's just quite incredible. So there was in Valencia, we had all these different carvers. Some of them were those traditional Spanish varieties, but they were moving into the noble varieties.
So you talked there about some of the tours that you've done that involve sparkling wines. What about the sparkling wine tastings the IWFS has done?
So they have done, there was a tasting recently where they put in, I think, 6 or 7 of the Grand Marques and a special surprise. And in fact, the special surprise was an timber wine. And it got twice as many votes as the wine that came second. It was really incredible. But with the 1976 Judgment of Paris anniversary coming up next year, I know they've got in the pipeline some tastings of lots of different things, but one will be champagne and sparkling wines to see the difference and how well they're doing.
That must have been, though, fascinating, going back to that. I think it was February, wasn't it, that this tasting with the champagnes and the one Timber wine. Yeah. I mean, they were proper stellar champagnes in that tasting, weren't they? Then Timber came out on top, which is quite extraordinary.
But yes, I mean, Timber, they were of the modern era of English wine, as you guys well know. They were the first, and they were really setting their mark very, very quickly and very early on. I remember visiting, and they were quadrupling their plantings, and it was going to take something like 14 years for it all to come on board and go into vintages and everything. But it was heavy investment, and yeah, I mean, they'd gone from strength to strength.
So 2026, you've got various head-to-head tastings planned, and one of them, as you say, marks the 50th anniversary of the 1976 Judgment of Paris tasting when upstart American wines bested the French classics. So that will involve, will it, a mixture of champagne and rest of the world?
Yes, they're doing a set of the tastings, and there is going to be a sparkling wine one, which to all intents and purposes is champagne versus the rest of the world.
How exciting.
I'm not quite sure you can say that anymore, really, though, because there's such good sparkling wines coming out of everywhere else that it's almost which is going to be the best amongst equals. I realise you can't really say that with champagne either, but I'm sure they'll forgive me.
What kind of sparkling wines tend to feature, though, in IWFS tastings?
There doesn't seem to be any real theme. They, as I say, it can be anything from, again, 1988, the journal that I was reading the other day, Belgian sparkling wine to start their evening. Now, I then looked up in Essi's book, and yep, she clearly states Belgium been doing it for a while. I believe over 100 years. So, it shouldn't be that unusual, but there's only so much that we can all know about and learn about. So actually, that's what I love, even being in the wine trade and yet going to these things, is you always learn something.
And what do you enjoy most about sparkling wine, Mimi?
It's just a bit of fizz. I love it. I really like it. I didn't used to like it as when I was younger, but I do find it's just a really light, refreshing, great acidity. You don't have to have food with it, but it goes well with food. It goes amazingly well with food. That's what I remember when I first did a champagne all through the meal event, and that was an eye-opener, the fact that it went with everything.
And what final message would you have to our listeners about the IWFS?
Find out your local branch, and if there is one, you can always go along as a guest for the first couple of events, see if you like it or not. They're great. You can also be a roving member. So if there isn't a branch near you, but you go to London occasionally or you go to Bath occasionally, you can be a member without territory, shall we say. And so you can go and see what's going on at all of them and pick when you're in the area or a particular subject theme that you want to go to or a particular restaurant you'd like to see. But yes, it's very fun.
Mimi, thank you so much.
Very fun. Love the sound of that. And of course, we'd emphasise the fact that the IWFS is a global organisation with hubs all over the world. Big membership in the Americas, I think, for example, then Europe, Africa, Asia. And clearly, they do some seriously cool stuff, including organising intriguing tastings, like the blind tasting you were talking about with Mimi there, where the English sparkling wine Nightingale beats some pretty stellar Grand Marque champagnes.
Indeed, yeah. And it sounds like they're lining up a bunch of similarly fun tastings in 2026 to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Judgment of Paris back in 1976. So as we say, well worth checking out the IWFS. In the meantime, we need to recommend a few cool sparkling wines before we wrap up.
We do. So we asked Essi for some tips from her monograph for traditional method fizz from outside champagne that's a bit, different or good value or just interesting. We deliberately steered away from English sparkling wine because we talk about that a fair bit on the show already, as you will well know. But we had some pretty fun stuff to taste, don't we?
We did, yeah. So let's kick off with something completely different. This is the Filipa Pato 3B Rosé, Brut Nature, Unfiltered, from Portugal. A blend of mainly the Barga grape with 16% Bical. It's got 9 months on the lees. It's about £20, so not expensive, not in the fizz context. And it's a bit crazy, isn't it? It is decidedly artisanal and fairly natural, I'd say, in feel. It's got flavours of bruised apples, spiced black fruit, a slightly salty note on the finish. It's very dry, but I really like it. It's something to have, I guess, with, a nice rustic pâté on brioche or some charcuterie, ideally in a low-lit natural wine bar surrounded by uber cool people.
So not me then. I wouldn't be invited to that.
I probably wouldn't be there either.
No,
but I like to think I would.
No, you try.
In my dreams.
It's definitely fun and different, isn't it? I think it wouldn't be for everyone. And it's definitely worlds away from your sort of squeaky clean fruit plus yeasty tones of classic traditional method fizz. But do you know what? I think there is a place for this.
There is. It's a low-lit natural wine bar.
There you go.
Cool
That's the place. But, the thing is that I know some people argue that classic sparkling wine, traditional methods shouldn't be oxidative or funky. But I think there's room for all styles across all wine categories. I think this is really important. As long as it's clear what the style is, that's fine.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be closed-minded in wine. We should embrace diversity and risk and fun in wine, whatever the style. Do you agree?
Mm-hmm. You done with your soapbox now?
I am. I'm stepping off.
Good, because I'm afraid I want to get on mine.
Right, I see. That's the way it
works. We can't both be on a box together. No. Now, this is to talk about the issue of fizz with food. Both Essi and Mimi mentioned it,
Yeah.
and I get it. Good sparkling wine can make a very good match for some dishes or food. Of course it can. You've got fresh acidity, a fundamental help when it comes to food matching, and you've got savoury flavours as well as fruit. Where I disagree is the idea of having sparkling wine all the way through a meal. It's fun to try it, but actually in practice, I always find myself quite quickly feeling desperate for a glass of red. Because these wines, you know, as lovely as they are, tend to inhabit similar flavour spectrums in a relatively high acid style. And within a meal involving a few courses, you want to change things up. You can do that with the food, which you obviously do. So it makes sense to do it with the wine too.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, we've both done these sort of champagne-only meals, haven't we? And they're really interesting. I mean, you feel privileged to do it. They're interesting sort of almost from an academic sort of perspective, intellectual perspective. But from a pure enjoyment point of view, you do find yourself gasping for a red or whatever.
Or whatever, yeah, or still white,
So,
or,
yeah,
you know, whatever.
I mean, I agree with you. You know, fizz can go well with food, but I don't know. I think we would say enjoy it with a range of nibbles or perhaps the starter. But then, you know, give me a good white or red or tawny port or whatever after that. You know, apart from anything else, you end up getting quite gassy, I think, from all that sparkling wine. Gassy.
I mean, I'm going
Gassy.
to, yeah.
Maybe that's a personal, is that a personal thing? I apologise. Maybe I'm just spilling too many secrets here, but, yeah, it's like lager and curry, isn't it? It's great in theory, and you know, we've all been there, but my word, you end up with a full stomach made even fuller from bubbles. You know,
I can't believe you've got onto beer and curry in a posh sparkling wine episode. Talk about lowering the tone. Anyway, I'm going to get things back on track with the Dubl Brut Edition 1. And this is
it
made...
Dubl or double?
Oh,
I don't
maybe it's
know.
double.
It could be either,
I feel like it's Dubl.
Yeah, it could be either.
Whatever you fancy.
Let's pronounce it however the hell we want to pronounce it.
It's Italian, so a bit of Italian accent, which I can't do. Anyway, it's made from the Greco, which I think is the right way to pronounce it, grape in Campania. It's about £35. Now, Essi mentioned this kind of thing when she was talking about the rise of autochthonous grape varieties. And you don't really expect traditional method fizz from southern Italy either, do you? But it's made by Feudi di San Gregorio, who apparently took advice from the brilliant Champenois Anselm Sellos.
Two very good producers.
Two very good producers, yeah. It's fairly long lees aged, and it's impressively fresh and well balanced with a herbal lime rind quality. It's not very autolytic or yeasty, but it's pretty elegant, isn't it?
It's almost like a fine white wine with elegantly integrated bubbles. You know, as a bonus, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's that sort of style. Maybe one for people who don't want a super acidic, sort of yeasty, champagne-y style, but want something, you know, a bit more savoury and weighty, perhaps, than Prosecco. Anyway, moving on, but sticking in Italy, which Essi, of course, mentions as being a very dynamic country for traditional method fizz. I've got the Ferrari Perle Centodoc Brut 2018. Don't know if I pronounced that right, but this is 100% Chardonnay, made in the Centodoc region in northern Italy, aged at least 5 years on the lees. And you definitely get that sort of autolytic, bready, biscuity character here, don't you? With a kind of honeyed, almondy apple and sort of lemon flavour spectrum too. It's generous and savoury, isn't it? The fizz is quite soft, but there's lots going on here.
Lots of people are talking about Trenta Doc and Franciacorta, aren't they, in terms of traditional method fizz. This one is maybe not as refined as good champagne, but there's plenty of wine there. Now, next up, something completely different. Shandong China Rosé from the Helan Mountain in Ningxia. Now, Essi mentioned this as a relatively new frontier in fine fizz, and Shandong China's Brut won a gold medal at the 2024 Decanter World Wine Awards. It looks elegant in the glass. It has flavours of rich apple and sweet strawberry. It's got nice, well-integrated bubbles. The dosage is quite high at 22 grams per litre, so you definitely get that off-dry finish. But it's not cloying. No. And do you know where I think this would work? At the risk of contradicting myself, this would go well with food, you know, especially with slightly spicier Chinese dishes, or ones that involve a little bit of sweetness.
Yeah, I totally see that. Totally see. It's probably quite versatile in that sense, isn't it?
Yeah,
and it's really pretty well made in that style too. I mean, just extrapolating further, Essi did mention when we chatted how having Champenois expertise can help new regions and countries develop so much faster than if they don't. Precisely because, as she says, this style is so complicated to make and tiny details make such a big difference. So, experience really counts.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously Chandon is part of LVMH, which owns Moet, Veuve Clicquot, Krug, etc. And they've helped fast track sparkling production from Argentina to India to Australia and China. Even Nightimber, which we've mentioned, had Champenois help initially back in the day from Jean-Manuel Jacquinot.
Yeah, good point.
So it's a collective effort, isn't it?
Absolutely. So one wine left each, and we're running short on time. And talking of champagne expertise, I've got a more luxury option. It's the Domaine Carneros Le Rêve 2015 Blanc de Blanc. This is Champagne Tattinger's outpost in California. And now this isn't cheap. As I've said, it's about £105 retail, but it is pretty special. No, this is full on. Mm-hmm. You've got lemon pith and roasted apple fruit. You've got nutty, toasty, bready, autolytic aromas. You've then got hints of tobacco and dried fruit and white chocolate from the maturity. It's very long, very complex stuff. Maybe you could argue a bit obvious and upfront, but there's so much class and complexity here too, and the dosage is spot on. Fabulous stuff.
A fizz to sink into, I wrote.
Right.
And talking California, this does also remind me of our Battle of the Bubbles earlier this year, the tasting we did. Now, Le Rêve is expensive and wonderful, but at that tasting, the Roederer Quartet showed really well, up against Krug no less. And that's, I think it's only about £30-ish. So all this goes to show, if you weren't already aware, how California can make really good traditional method fizz across a range of price points.
Totally. And of course, the other one we flagged up in value terms from the Battle of the Bubbles was the Pelorus Rosé from Cloudy Bay in New Zealand, which was not only the official best value result from the whole event, but it also tasted better than the Laurent Perrier Rosé for both of us in that little category. And that is, what, 26 quid? Versus 80 quid for the Laurent Perrier Rosé, and of course Essi did mention New Zealand very positively too.
Yeah, we definitely endorsed that, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
Now my final wine is a bit different.
It's a bit bigger for a start. Why do you get a big bottle?
Bigger.
That's not fair, is it?
I like big bottles. But it ties into Essi's mention of not just Eastern Europe, but also the Magnum format.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah,
anyway, so we have got a Magnum of Sauska Brut from Hungary, the Tokai region, where there's some really good fizz being made. This is a blend of Fourment, Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. Champagne winemaker Régis Camus consulted. And it's lovely, precisely because it's a bit different. Yeah. You get these lifted floral aromas together with ripe apricot and orange rind notes. There's a delicate yeastiness to it. The dosage is well balanced. If you're not looking for autolysis and structure and power, and you want something a bit more lifted and refreshing and fruity, this is a very good option. And plus, it looks great too.
It is pretty cool.
Yeah, Magnum, cool. Lovely label. It's really nice.
I've definitely got my eye on that for tonight. It's going to be a Magnum night tonight.
You in on your own?
Well, yeah, I wasn't envisaging you sharing anyway, I have to say. Anyway, you have to ask very nicely. And of course, if you want any more tips, there are loads of tips and recommendations in Essi's monograph. Right. Any last comments about traditional method sparkling wine before we sign off? I know this is a big, favourite subject.
It's very close to my heart. I think I just agree with Essi that this is a really dynamic wine scene. So many exciting wines from an increasing range of origins and across a growing range of styles, which is great to see. I'd say it would be good to see more value wines that really major on the main asset of traditional method, which is the yeasty, savoury flavours. There are slightly too many so-called traditional method sparklings that just don't deliver much flavour or savoury complexity, and that's always a shame.
Yeah, I agree. And just thinking about it, I'd pick up on a point that Essi made about deliciousness, which I thought was a really good point and a lovely word. It's so vital in any wine, but particularly with fizz, and so the global trend to ultra low sugar levels is misguided, to my mind, except in exceptional cases. And I know we've said this before on the pod, but I'd say it again here. It's better to make a balanced wine that is truly delicious and will keep you going back, not just for another sip, but also another bottle or another case, So, I think we should raise a glass to deliciousness in our fizz.
I sense another batch of T-shirts being ordered. Right, time to wrap things up. By way of closing summary, traditional method sparkling wine is a dynamic and ever more diverse scene from Hungary to China via southern Italy and beyond. There's so much to learn about and explore when it comes to sparkling wines. And one good way to do that is via Essi Avellan's excellent monograph, or indeed joining the International Wine and Food Society.
Yes, thanks to the IWFS for sponsoring this episode. Do consider checking them out or joining. Head to IWFS.org, or there's a link in our show notes. There are also links to get your discount on Essi's monograph, or if you're a Wine Blast Plus subscriber, your free copy if you're among the first 50 to request it.
Another great reason to subscribe to Wine Blast Plus right there. And we do have more benefits coming soon. Meantime, thanks to our interviewees Essi Avellan and Mimi Avery. And finally, thanks to you for listening. Until next time, cheers.
Thank you for listening right to the end of the programme. You deserve some sort of medal, or maybe a glass of fine wine, whatever. Either way, if you're a regular Wine Blast listener, you'll know we do occasional sponsorships, both episodic and headline. You might not have thought of this, but if you're involved with a company, brand or region who could benefit from exposure to a top-notch global community of wine lovers, get in touch.
Wine Blast goes out to 200 countries and thousands of listeners. It's won multiple awards and is regularly one of the highest ranking drinks shows in global charts, with a knack of making national and international headlines, despite being a totally independent production made with a lot of passion and hard graft. If you'd like to support the show and take your message to an ever-growing global audience, get in touch by emailing contact@susieandpeter.com. That address is also on our website show notes, or you can find us on social media.